this is the yellow-lipped sea krait. It's a type of semi-aquatic snake that lives in the Indian and West Pacific Oceans, as well as on land in the countries surrounding it. It's largely, despite the name sea krait, found on land, and while it does hunt in the water quite often, it does have to come back on land in order to digest and reproduce, because it's not capable of doing either of those things while swimming in the water. The end of the tail is kind of flattened vertically into a more paddle shape, so it can wave it back and forth and very easily swim through the water. It's mainly nocturnal and typically very non-aggressive, so bites from it are rare. However, if bites do occur, then it's very dangerous and has to be treated almost immediately because they have very, very potent venom. The venom acts as a neurotoxin, meaning it messes with your nerve signals and firing. Specifically, it stops the synapses from firing properly. It acts as a competitive inhibitor for acetylcholine, which means the venom is a kind of molecule that competes with the acetylcholine for the binding site. So where acetylcholine normally binds to, this venom will try to race it and get there first, and if the venom gets to the binding site before the acetylcholine, then it will mess with the synapse and stop the nerves from firing. The toxin is quite potent and has a rather low LD50 of about 0.45 milligrams per kilogram for body weight in mice. Symptoms include things like paralysis, convulsions, lethargy, as well as things like cyanosis, which is your body kind of taking on a bluish purple color because there's less oxygen binding to the hemoglobin in your blood. Specifically, the toxin is an alpha neurotoxin, which is mainly found in snake venom, particularly sea snake venom. And the main cause of death tends to be respiratory failure, so your lung muscles just stop working. If not treated quickly enough, it can lead to paralysis or eventually death due to said respiratory failure. This is Phia's viper. It's native to areas in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam, China, and Tibet. There's actually two species, the white-headed and the black-headed Phia's viper, and both of them do look very cool. They are rather elusive and quite rare to see, so not a lot is known about them. However, they are under least concern since they do have a very wide range. They are, like all viper species, quite venomous, and while they're not the most venomous, you still don't want to get bit by them. There is one compound found in the venom that does block certain receptors in the muscles, so not a very good time. Despite the fact that they are venomous like all vipers, there is a demand for them in the exotic pet trade. While this currently does not have any noticeable effect on the population, it could contribute in the future. However, they are still under least concern now. That being said, venomous snakes do not make good pets, so don't get venomous snakes as pets, please. Stream Heinz Hall, all proceeds go to Palestine. I'm willing to bet that most of you guys watching this video know what a rattlesnake is, but I'm also willing to guess that at least some of you don't know how the rattle on the end of the rattlesnake works. Rattlesnakes are very well known for being rattlesnakes. They have this little attachment on the end of their tail that they basically shake at predators and other threats, being like, hey, I'm here, you can fuck right off. Now, most people, their minds go to maracas when you think about shaking something around to make a sound. Logically, that makes sense, as maracas, they are shaken, they make a rattle, they have these little beans or seeds or whatever have you inside of the wooden casing. And so again, logically, that is where the brain would go when thinking about how a rattlesnake rattle works. However, that is not really how it works. That is not the case. Now, this is a closer up image of a rattlesnake rattle. You can see the end one down there. That is the oldest one, and as the snake ages, it sheds its skin, and whenever it sheds, it can add a new segment up here right at the top. So as it ages, the rattle gets longer, and it actually can be used to tell the age of a different rattlesnake based on how many segments of the tail it has. Now, to make the sound, there's not actually any loose, like free-floating bits in there like in an actual maraca where there's beans and seeds. There's nothing just free-floating in there. There's no like particles rattling around inside a hollow tail. This is a cross-section of a rattlesnake tail. You can see up the end there, and you can see all of these segments. Now, these segments are hollow, but they don't contain any loose particles inside them to make the rattling sound. You can see each ridge here on the cross-section. It tends to correspond with each of these bumps in the visible segments on the full intact rattlesnake rattle. Now, how this works is all of these segments are very loosely connected to each other. So when they shake, all of the edges are hard and calcified and they rattle against each other, which is what actually produces the sound. So when the rattlesnake is agitated or angry, it will shake its rattle, causing these segments to knock against each other, producing the sound. So it makes the same rattling sound as a maraca, but not by the same mechanism. There's no loose particles in there shaking around the inside like there is in a maraca instrument. And basically, this acts as a warning sound for the snake to be like, hey, I'm here. I'm very venomous. You do not want to get bit by me because that will be a very bad time for you, so I am giving you a very clear warning to just go away. Have y'all ever seen a really big snake climb a tree? If not, it sure is something. Little snakes can get away with just kind of slithering their way up the bark. Big snakes cannot do that. They are too large, so they have to use other methods, which include coiling around and around the tree by constricting it, using their muscles to basically squeeze their way up so they don't slide down while they climb up the tree to get at, I don't know, a bird or a monkey or something. And they're good at it too. Buddy up here is straight motoring up that tree. So, yeah, big snakes can climb trees, so don't think you're safe up there. Let's make one more video before my substances of the night have kicked in. Nothing bad, but let's talk about the Arabian sand boa because it's interesting. So this absolute fucking muppet of a snake is the Arabian sand boa. It is endemic to the Arabian Peninsula, meaning that it is only found there, and it is very well adapted to those specific climates. It is a mainly nocturnal species, so it spends most of its time buried beneath the sand in the sand dunes, and that's why its eyes are like that, because it spends most of its time buried underneath the sand with just its eyes sticking up above the water like one of those fucking periscopes or something. So that way it stays cool, it stays hidden, it doesn't lose an excessive amount of, like, body heat or water, but it can also see anything going on above the sand, so if there's any prey animals like a little mouse or a smaller snake or a lizard or something that it wants to eat, it can see that, so it can pop out of the sand and then take it. So while it looks like a child's bad drawing of a snake, those interesting adaptations do have a function, and that function helps it survive in a pretty extreme environment where it lives. So yeah, there we go. Very interesting to look at snake that is just very well adapted to the specific environment that it lives in. This is the Thorny Devil, a childhood favorite lizard of mine that lives in the hot and dry areas of Australia. They are insectivores, meaning they eat mainly ants as well as other insects, and they do actually have a very interesting way of drinking water. Since they live in such dry areas, there really is not enough moisture available for them to drink normally, so what they do is use specially designed scales on them to collect dew and other moisture. What they do is in the mornings, they walk around in dewy areas and brush up against things that have dew on them, mainly plants. The dew drops onto their scales and runs down towards their mouth, where they then drink it directly from their scales. They also have a quite distinct way of walking. They take a step, they kind of freeze, they bob back and forth, and then take another step, and this continues on. This is thought to be a defense mechanism to deter predators, mainly birds of prey. They're also very spiky, very thorny, and those spikes are rather sharp and not at all appetizing for predators to eat. These thorns are specially designed on their skin and scales to be sharp and pointy and very painful to predators. And they also kind of have this blob of soft tissue called a false head, which is on the back of their regular head to kind of confuse predators as well. Hopes is that when they're being attacked by a predator, they can just kind of duck their normal head down so the predator will bite the false head, which does not contain any important body parts such as eyes and brains. And hopefully that gives the Thorny Devil an extra chance to be able to get away with minimal damage. This is an Indian cobra, a very distinct looking snake with its very distinctive hood all flared up. This is a king cobra, probably the most well-known type of cobra, as well as the largest type of cobra, and the longest venomous snake in the world. But, as you may have noticed, it does not have its hallmark hood flared up. And this is what it looks like when a cobra raises and flares its hood. So, how exactly does that work? What makes the hood of the cobra go up and down? Now, the flaring of the hood basically is a warning sign from the cobra to potential threats, being like, hey, I'm here, I'm big, I'm venomous, and I don't want to bite you, and you certainly don't want to get bit, so just back off, babe. But how exactly does that work? The answer is, it's all due to the skeleton. Snake skeletons in general are very loosey-goosey, they're very loosely attached and thus very flexible. The skeletons, particularly around the head, neck, and jaws area, are very, very loose and can kind of distort dramatically. This is seen very often in snakes that can unhinge their jaws in order to kind of eat things way bigger than should ever be eaten by a snake that size. And it's kind of the same principle with cobras, except instead of the jaws, it's their ribs. This is the skeleton of a cobra, and as you can see right up there, that is the flare where the hood would be, and that is their ribs standing out. So this motion right here, that is actually the ribs of the cobra, the skeleton moving out and expanding in order to create that hood. Whenever the snake wants to be like, hey, fuck off, they will kind of stand, I guess, upright and then dramatically flare their ribs out to make themselves look big into that distinctive hood. This is the red-necked keelback. It is a rather small species of snake that is very widely distributed throughout many, many countries in Asia. All snakes are venomous to some degree, and this guy is no different. It does have some quite toxic and very potent venom. Deaths from this type of snake bite are quite rare, however they do come in the form of kidney failure as well as massive hemorrhaging, particularly in the brain. And currently there isn't really any effective antivenom, however fortunately bites are rather rare. However, what is interesting about this type of snake is that they are also one of the very, very few snakes in the world that are also poisonous instead of just venomous. Part of their diet includes poisonous toads, and when they eat them, instead of being harmed by their poison, they just kind of absorb it and then secrete it themselves out of special glands. And while humans don't really have to worry about that poison, because if you're close enough to be poisoned by this snake, it is most likely that you've been bitten and you have other problems, it is an interesting case of an animal that is both poisonous and venomous. This is the basilisk lizard. It is a type of very interesting lizard found throughout a bunch of areas in South and Central America. It typically lives in more forested wood areas that are always close to water, because water is essential for its very interesting mechanism of escaping predators. The basilisk lizard also has another name, the Jesus lizard or the Jesus Christ lizard, because it escapes predators by running on water. When a predator comes, they will just run out onto the nearest body of water and quite literally just run across it. It uses this very effective and kind of ridiculous looking bicycle motion with its legs. Now, it accomplishes this by having a very strong and effective webbing between the toes on its hind legs. When they run on the water, they spread those toes kind of as wide as they can, and the webbing helps trap air bubbles beneath them and kind of push them along the water. Now, younger lizards that are typically quite a lot smaller can run a lot longer than their older, heavier versions. There's been a max speed of about 25 kilometers per hour recorded and a max distance of about 10 to 20 meters. And this doesn't happen indefinitely. They cannot just keep running on water. Eventually, they lose speed and start to sink. However, fortunately, they are rather good swimmers as well, so they will just continue swimming along underwater until they have escaped from their predators. Did you know that some snakes can fly? There is a genus of snakes, very creatively commonly called the flying snakes, that are found in areas of Southeast Asia. They're found in the more forested areas of countries like Vietnam, Myanmar, China, and India, as well as in the countries of the Philippines and Indonesia. Now, there's actually multiple species of flying snakes within this genus, but this is just kind of a broad encompassing of the genus itself. Now, while they are called flying snakes, they actually glide. They do not have powered flight, so they can't take off into the air like a bird or perhaps a bat. So their movement is a lot more similar to gliding frogs or sugar gliders or flying squirrels. Now, these snakes will glide for multiple reasons, such as escaping predators or other threats, getting from just one branch to another a easier way than climbing all the way down and back up, or if they see something that they want to eat on another tree or the ground, they can quickly just launch themselves at it. And they are very good at aiming and predicting where they can land, and while they can't maneuver super well in the air, they do have some degree of maneuverability and can slightly change their direction while midair if they need to. Now, when the snake wants to take off, they just kind of launch themselves out of the tree in the direction where they want to go, and in the air, they have some maneuverability and some propulsion forwards by, like, aggressively wiggling through the air in the same motion as they do on the ground. Now, the mechanism for how they are able to glide so well, even more efficiency than things like flying squirrels, is their ribs. In a manner very similar to how Cobra hoods work, if you remember that video, when they want to glide, they kind of spread their ribs out into this flattened but also concave shape that works very well at trapping air underneath and providing them that uplift to stay in the air kind of as long as they want. The ribs flatten out into a manner that gives them a lot more surface area to be able to hold the air underneath, and that concave shape kind of just directs the air in a most efficient manner. And they are very good at this. It has been observed that they can glide for a max length of about 100 meters or 300 feet. And they are mildly venomous, but not enough to be medically significant. This is the spotted Harlequin snake, a very interesting looking type of snake that is found mainly in South Africa. Now, it ranges quite widely throughout most of the areas in South Africa and can be found in grasslands, more wooded areas, and even makes its home in termite mounds. Now, one of the interesting things about the spotted Harlequin snake is that the coloration varies a whole lot depending on where the snake lives. This is a more grassland variation, and ones that live in rockier or forested areas look quite different. Now, bites from the spotted Harlequin snake are rather uncommon, however, they are mildly venomous. It reportedly does cause some pain and some swelling and has mildly cytotoxic effects. However, it's not serious, and antivenom usually is not required unless in the case of an allergy.